Hello and welcome back to the Mind Meld PR vlog. I am your host, Jonathan Narvi, and I am here with my colleague, Shawnee Kotecha.
Hi.
Very modest and humble intro.
Hello.
Everybody knows who we are. They've already watched this show a bunch. So what are we talking about today? Our topic, this is a fun one. What to do when a PR campaign fails? Because what could be more entertaining than talking about a train wreck, a car crash? Who could look away? So a little bit of context before we get into the weeds here. First of all, I should say that while failing is not something we like to do, and it's not something that happens every day, it it happens, particularly if we're talking about working with a client long term, and so someone we've been working with for months and months, possibly years. We throw a lot of stuff at the wall. We run many types of PR campaigns all the time. And I know it's amazing that this is something you've probably never thought of before, but actually many of these or some of these don't go so well. Shawnee, any thoughts on this before we get into it?
Yeah, the failures tend to vary, I think, whether one it's on our side or something that's out of our control. That is a big part of it, but also, it's if a whole campaign has failed or just one small thing in it sometimes makes a big difference in, I guess, how we'd approach it afterwards.
Good point. I want to touch on something you just said there a moment ago, which is, how much of it is, whether it's on us or the client. I mean, in a certain sense, it's always on us. We are the PR professionals. We are bringing the service. We are the experts. So when things go well and when things go off the rails, it's on us. So this is an important part of the relationship that a PR company can have with a client. If your PR company is, whether things are going well or going badly, eventually something doesn't quite work out, and it's a good indication that something larger may be, a bigger problem may be there if that firm is not taking responsibility. So I want to get into, first of all, what a PR campaign is. I should reiterate what we're talking about here. Then once that's out of the way, we can talk about how PR campaigns fail. And then most importantly, maybe, is how you dig yourself out of that hole. What to do when a PR campaign goes wrong, what to do when it fails.
Also, what it looks like when it fails, because I think with PR, there's a certain amount of expected failure. Like you can pitch 100 pitches, but it's unlikely you'll get 100 responses. But if you get 60, some people might see that as a fail. But for us, that would actually be quite a good win. So what does a failed one actually look like?
Right. So we'll get into that in a moment. I think, and I just want to. This is going to reiterate some of the things you just said. But again, what is a PR campaign? We're talking about, well, at its most basic level, a campaign is a certain amount of effort and resources thrown at a particular objective. For us, it's getting news coverage for our clients. And that effort can take many forms. For us, as Shawnee was alluding to just now, it's a lot of it has to do with pitching, targeting, but a lot of elements can go into it. So there's the plan, there's the objective, there's the effort that goes into it, and at some point you've got to take a measure of the results. What did you get? And a campaign can run for a day, it can run for a week, it can run for potentially multiple months if you've got something big. And it could be about a fundraise, could be about a product launch. There's any number of subjects that a PR campaign could include. So that's what a PR campaign is. How can it go off the rails? Shawnee, list the ways.
Well, you usually start off with okay, we want to get this many hits, or this is what we want. I guess not meeting that is step one. So just not getting any coverage whatsoever, any responses, any pickup, that would be classed as a fail. That's the main way. Is there another way it can fail?
Well, right. Well, if the overall objective is did we get media coverage, then that's a very simple metric. And yeah, and that's fine. It can go wrong, but there are degrees of failure. There is, for instance, a failure where reporters get back to you and they say, interesting angle, but we already covered it. Or this is again, interesting angle, but it is a bit outside of our audience. Or you know what, this isn't for me. This is for my buddy in the next department. You should have had his contact. So in terms of things that go wrong, sometimes reporters will tell you what's going wrong. And if you start getting the same kinds of feedback from reporters from different outlets, you should be listening to that. You're as a PR person, you're not just a broadcaster. This is two-way communication. Probably the worst thing that can happen from a campaign is that you get zero response. So not just zero news coverage, but reporters don't respond to you. They don't even say nope. They don't even say not interested. They don't tell you why. They just you just get a wall of silence. That's the worst. It's the worst because you don't necessarily know what went wrong, but you know something went wrong. When it comes to what to do when a campaign fails, spoiler alert, the main takeaway that you're going to get from this podcast is you want to use every failure as a learning experience so that your next campaign can be more successful. So let's get into some of the failures we have actually experienced. We will not be mentioning any company names to save them any embarrassment, but mostly to save us embarrassment. I don't know if we're doing that since the topic is what it is, but maybe Shawnee, what are some of the I don't know, less positive experiences we've had over the last, say, 6 months?
Yeah, I think my most frustrating one, or not the most frustrating, once we sort of nailed what the problem um, was a client that sort of was using a very specific detail about their announcement. So I won't name what it is, but whether it's like a specific number of funding or a specific location or a specific name in the company. One of those things was sort of a big part of their hook. And I guess, the pitch went out, it was written well, it did get pickup, but the failure was that the key detail that made it so special was misunderstood. So, it was getting covered, but not in the way the client wanted. So it was a weird one because I think we thought that we succeeded, but it actually turned out to be a little bit of a fail. when actually we thought that we had sort of asked all the questions, got all the right answers. But in fact, the fact that it was a prominent detail meant that we probably should have asked 10 more questions just to make sure.
If I know we're not naming the company here, but if I recall this one correctly, we did ask those questions. We
Yeah.
we asked them not just once, twice. I think we got annoying at one point because it wasn't that they weren't giving us the answer that we wanted. It's that there was, people will use ambiguous
Mm,
words or ambiguous phrases, and it's like, okay, this is an important thing that we need to know. And we wanted to clarify this point because we knew it could be an issue, and and we were right. We were right. It did turn out to be an issue, and what's the lesson we take from that? Maybe we could have, you want to get your facts sorted from the outset. You want to manage expectations with your client. This could be an issue, so just so you know. And I don't know. Do you have any other takeaways from that particular campaign and how it went?
I'd say don't settle for ambiguity for
Mm,
sure. Like,
mm,
if something's even remotely questionable. But another good way to sort of either fact check the ambiguity is
mm,
looking at other sources. So, if we looked at their public profile, we might have gotten answers sooner.
mm.
But I think, yeah, you can ask your client questions, but you also need to do your own. Sometimes you need to be a detective and just go and find out things, that they've put up elsewhere online to see
Yes.
if you can sort of corroborate details.
Yeah, part of the problem is that in some companies, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Maybe someone on the marketing team early on with the company, say, posted up Facebook profile info or LinkedIn profile info. That is what was true at the time, but
Mhm,
maybe they're not with the company anymore. That has gotten overlooked, hasn't been updated. Or you've got again, websites for companies can be written by multiple people. That's not uncommon to have certain pages that say that the new head of marketing just they haven't really taken a close look at, and there's a bit of a
mhm,
mismatch in terms of how they used to describe themselves and how they currently describe themselves. Whether this is in terms of products, services, their processes, even their location, it's something doesn't match, and boy, is that kind of confusion annoying to reporters. And that's the last thing we want to do, is annoy the people that we're reaching out to all the time, because
yeah.
there was a real danger in this situation of not just not getting coverage, which sucks, but actually burning a relationship with certain reporters just because they were so annoyed.
Mhm,
And fortunately, we got past it.
yeah.
Just clear communication, acknowledgement if things have gotten wrong. So if a reporter calls you out on something that's a mismatch, um, acknowledge it. Don't just don't go and blame. Oh, those our stupid client did this. No, 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 because you're working with them, and also we have to take responsibility. If we've passed along some kind of communication, that means we've vetted it. We have to do our due diligence as well. So I think that covers it, or
Yeah, I was just gonna
yeah.
say, just I didn't think of this before, but it,
Mm,
it kind of means you can't look at PR in isolation. So you might be
mm,
just writing a press release,
mm,
but the rest of the world is seeing the press release, whatever
mm,
marketing they've done, whatever advertising they've done.
mm.
And if something you're putting out in that release doesn't line up with the rest of their communication strategy, then that's a problem. So we'll try and see
Abs-
it from the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I often tell prospects who are maybe unsure about even what's the difference between PR and marketing, that I like to think of PR as a subset of marketing. It's a force multiplier for the rest of your marketing. So you definitely want your marketing and communications to literally be on the same page
Mm.
as your PR campaigns. Okay, so that was one campaign that sort of I can't say it went off the rails. We got coverage,
Yeah, no, what
and
great.
but there were some definite bumps in the road. There's I can think of another client that another campaign that where things went off the rails were, well, the types of coverage. It's not that we weren't getting coverage. It's that it was the types of coverage that the client wasn't actually that impressed with.
Mm,
And it was these weren't the exact words to us, but this has happened a few times enough in the last few years that I call it the New York Times or nothing expectation of PR results. Um, so when you're kicking off a PR campaign with, say, a brand new company that no one really knows anything about, they have no presence, um, then you can't necessarily, you can try to get in those big pieces of media. You can try for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and the big magazines and TV shows and radio shows that everybody knows. But it's also a good strategy to not put all your eggs into one basket and to diversify the kinds of outreach that you're doing.
mm,
So that was how we tried to run that campaign, was with a diversified effort of personalized outreach to reporters from many different kinds of publications that wrote about a particular sector that this company was in. I'm
mm,
sure you remember the company that I'm
mhm.
talking about. I don't know if you have any sort of thoughts on what went wrong there, or and as importantly, what we could have done differently, and in fact, what we do differently now.
Yeah, I mean, it ties less into the actual approach, but, managing expectations.
Hmm.
So sort of saying, if you are a startup or you are in that stage, it's, we need to start at your level of media, right?
Hmm.
And it was something I sort of saw recently. I was building up a media list for a client, and we sent something out and it didn't get that many hits. And then once I started looking through, I clicked on reporters that I thought, okay, they're tech reporters, but they, one person exclusively wrote about Apple, one person exclusively wrote about the big tech companies. So a lot of these, if you look at something like TechCrunch or Wired or things like that, they do some smaller stories, but depending on the reporter and depending on, the current news or what's going on, there are some that are sort of exclusively the big names. So sort of refining media, I think, is what we've gotten from that. Like you said, diversifying. So it's not just the big news outlets, it's blogs, and I don't think we've tapped into influencers before, but podcasts, things like that, because they still
Yeah,
have value.
yeah. It absolutely pays to get your targeting of reporters as hyper niche as possible. I've found this time and again. Uh, you know, Reaching out to the reporter who has written a dozen stories in a particular segment that you want to get into is generally way more useful than reaching out to the managing editor, who may not necessarily have 100% visibility into what all of their reporters have been writing about for the past 2 years.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, certainly, yeah, that experience, got us to both focus on managing expectations, and by that I don't mean down to something negligible, because every company wants value, and if you manage expectations to the point that um, you're saying something like, yeah, maybe we'll get you some news coverage in month 3, you've gone a little bit too far the other way, and you're probably going to be out of a job,
Mhm.
whether you're working internally or externally. So that's just something for the PR person to understand, as opposed to the company doing the hiring.
Mhm.
Um, okay, I, I don't want to give the impression that we have endless stories of failure, but I'm sure we have at least one other good example, say in the last 6 months, that was a good teaching experience for us. Shani?
Yeah, I've got one that's slightly less. It was less harmful as well. I always think of it as quite a contained one because
Mm.
it was a small fail. Um, and again, I think the learnings are quite iterative as well. Every little bit sort of builds, and this was something that hadn't really happened in a while or before. Um, so we had a press release campaign for a client, and they had just actually put out a press release of their own. Well, that was done already. So, we were adding to that, but we were, I guess, trying to add a new angle. Reporters had already picked up the first release that was put out, and we were aware of that. So we needed something new to be able to say, well, you were interested in this part, but here's a new angle that you could follow up with. Um, and I think the danger of it appeared when the press release just sort of repeated what the first one was saying, but slightly differently. It started as something, introducing a new topic, and then it slowly started morphing. It was a bit of feedback from the client, it was a bit of edits, and it sort of took on the form of the first one. And then when we put it out, we actually had a couple of reporters saying, oh, but we already covered this. Which is when the mistake became very apparent, as opposed to before, and we were like, yeah, maybe it'll be fine. Um, so I think, doing your research. So, okay, what are we writing for the client? What have they already been featured as? What's been written about them? What's been said about them? Because we don't want to repeat that because people have heard it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you're absolutely correct. We needed to differentiate the second story from the first a bit more. Number two, even the timing of it, probably, we did feel like we were in a rush to put out the release to take advantage of the recent news we were trying to tie into, but yeah, because it followed so closely on the first one, it fell a little flat. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, so I think that's something you want to consider in terms of spacing out your campaigns.
Mhm.
Certainly, I think you don't need to be putting out a press release every week or even every 2 weeks. It's There are other activities that go into that go into your PR campaigns. There's strategy. There's the personalized pitches that may not even need a release accompanying it. Um, that there's sometimes the related collateral that's maybe going on to the client's website, if you're a PR person who is handling that side of things on the social media front. There's lots of things to be doing in PR. You don't have to be putting out a new release every week. And in fact, if you're bugging the same reporters with a release every week, that's probably going to bite you in the ass. So
Yeah. I find actually with the long-term clients, what's more helpful is if there's been a reporter that's written about a relevant topic before,
mm,
following them on Twitter or LinkedIn to see what they're coming out with sort of gives you a good idea of what they might put out or what they will put out in the future. So if they're following the COVID vaccine, if you know what's about to happen or you're sort of seeing this is the direction it's going in, you can find somewhere to squeeze in. So not stalking them, but just keeping like a gentle eye on the relevant people with social media means that you don't have to send out press releases because you can just, you've got a connection and you can just say, hey, are you interested in this? Like
Mm.
even less than a pitch, like a 2 sentence reach out. Um, and then, they can see your social profile. They only have to read 2 sentences. There's already some context built in, so it's a little easier.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this ties into the news makes news trend that I often see in clients who we've been with longer term. It's easier to get news for them, get successes for them. Uh, and so when it comes to campaigns that fail and the learning that you gather from it, assuming you are doing a serious evaluation of every campaign, you're giving some real thought into what went wrong. How do we change the messaging? Maybe it's the subject line. Maybe it's the attached information. Maybe maybe we needed to attach images to this. Maybe these weren't the right images. There's many things that can go wrong and many things that can go right. But your batting average as you work on PR longer term, your batting average generally should start going up. Even just to keep this baseball analogy going a bit further, even those who have won the World Series still strike out from time to time. So, um, you know, it's about constantly improving and getting better over time, and that's what you want to see.
Mm.
Shawnee Katecha, always a pleasure talking to you about how to do PR for the Mind Meld PR vlog. You've been listening to Shawnee and I, Jonathan Narvey, the founder of Mind Meld PR. If you would like to, we're on YouTube, so if you want to like this, like it, that would be nice. Feeds the algorithm. Subscribe. Send us money, hire us. All good things. Okay. See you next time on the Mind Meld PR vlog.